So what we're going to do right now is we're going to continue on with the discussion of importing sub-D objects and polygonal objects, and we're going to be viewing the import panel inside of 3D Coat as we're trying to take in models. Now, typically, you're going to get a lot of people that are creating models, once again, from an exterior 3D application like Lightwave or Maya or 3D Studio Max or Softimage and so on and so forth. And so in a lot of cases, you'll have sub-D models or polygonal models. Remember, once again, you can still build models from scratch inside of 3D Coat and with voxels and retopologize them and actually make your own polygons. But a lot of times you'll want to have a 3D package on the outside to do sometimes cleanup, some of the cleanup stuff that you've done in 3D Coat through retopology. But anyways, to get to the point, I have a whole bunch of primitive objects. I just had the elephant up, and I have a lot of different shapes and stuff, just basic shapes I'm just going to use when I'm demonstrating importing some objects into the computer. Okay, so I'm going to just sort of close this one down. This already has an image map on it, so I'm going to close that off. I just wanted plain Jane geometry. Okay, so this is a polygonal model here of a cube. It's named Cube Low Poly, and you can see there isn't a lot of polygons in it. If we go into polygon mode, you can see if I circle it that we have 54 polygons, or if you open up the W key, you can see that a total amount of faces, which is 54. If it says faces, that means that these are polygonal style polygons. If it says subpatches, then that would mean that we have sub-D polygons. Okay, so there's 54 polygons on this cube. Now, like I said, we're using basic objects because it's a lot easier to get the point across than if I have I start off with complex meshes. I want you to understand what's going on when you're importing inside of 3D Coat. So this is a polygonal object. Let's shift over to 3D Coat. And I'm going to go over, remember, there's multiple ways that you can import, but I'm showing you directly from the file import directory. So File, you go to Import, okay, and we have Model per Pixel Painting. Okay, so let's start with that first, and then we are going to get into Model for Micro Vertex Painting. Just before we open it up, the difference is, once again, Model per Pixel Painting is when you're just trying to paint image maps without displacement. And we'll get into that. Micro Vertex Painting is when you actually want to displace the geometry. So per pixel painting is, you're painting color maps, you're painting normal maps, you're painting specular maps. There actually is no displacement in the surface. When you paint a normal map on, it creates an illusion of depth, but if you look at an object sideways after you've done this fake displacement, which is what a normal map or a bump map is, you'll see that no real displacement has been done. It's only an illusion when you're looking at it from a certain angle. Micro Vertex Painting, however, is true displacement. So if you made a bump on a sphere and you turn the sphere sideways, you'll see the bump actually protruding out of the side. But we're going to show you that in a second. So Model per Pixel Painting. Okay, let's grab the low poly. Okay, you can see this is our panel when we first open up. Now, you'll see initial subdivision. Now remember, this was supposed to be 54 polygons. Okay? If I put no subdivision, okay, and we'll leave auto mapping on, that's fine. And this is fine. We're not really painting. Click OK. And I loaded up the ball instead of the box. Silly me. Sorry, let's go new. And file. Import per pixel painting. Why did I pick ball low? I meant cube low poly. Sorry about that, guys. So let's go under no subdivision. Or should I go back here? Go to no subdivision. And remember how I said it originally, the actual model in Lightwave was, the model was 54 polygons. We go back over here and it says initial subdivision. So no subdivision means it's 54 polygons that's going to open up. Notice that the next increment is 216, which is 54 times 4. So when a polygon gets divided at one subdivision level, okay, basically in this case, the original base mesh was 54. The next level up is going to be 216 polygons. Okay, but let's go no subdivision first, just so that you can get an idea of this. So let's click OK. So here we are, our fabulous cube, and it's exactly, you can see that there's 9 polygons on each side, just like this critter here. Okay, 9 polygons per side. Okay, so you followed me on that. Fancy stuff, eh? Okay, so let's close that down. So I'm trying to show you like how things are working when you're moving back and forth in between when you're working between each piece of software, how things are, what the equivalent is, so that you know what you're doing. Like no subdivision is this original base mesh. Okay, now we're working with a polygonal object. Now, normally with polygonal objects, I don't subdivide them. Now, it's not that you can't do it, because obviously we can, because you saw the import section there. So let's go new. And the reason for it is this, in case you do want to add a subdivision level to it. But the problem is, well, let's get to this. We'll probably see some rounding. So let's go per pixel painting. And let's go cube low poly. And now it says no subdivision. Let's move up to 864. And let's click OK. See how we have rounding? It's subdivided it. And now we have more geometry. Now you're wondering, how come you're seeing a wireframe view of this? If we go under View, I had wireframe already selected. Okay. If I click on Low Poly, you'll actually get to see the original mesh cage. But what this does is it subdivide, like I said, when you subdivide the model, it creates more geometry. It's automatically turning this into a sub-D object. In Lightwave, there's different ways that I could subdivide a mesh. I can hit the tab key, but you can also subdivide this without the corners rounding. And so, like I said, this is the thing. If I have a hard surface model that I need to have these sharp creases and stuff, I just won't subdivide it. I did a spacecraft detailing video, and I didn't subdivide anything. So, like I said, keep that in mind. So polygonal objects, like I said, in general, you wouldn't. Let's import again. Just want to get to the panel, cube, blah, 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 blah. I would import a polygonal model, like I said, like a spaceship or anything that's hard surfaced, machines and stuff like that. I would keep them generally with no subdivision level. Now there can be instances where it might be applicable, but generally subdivision stuff I keep that more for characters. Okay, so you have all these multiple levels that you can go up and through. So let's try, 13,000. Whoops. This way we can just sort of see what it does. See how many polygons there is now? Okay. So as you can see, when I do now I'm painting displacement here. The only problem is because I'm in per pixel mode, it only paints a normal map on. It looks like, this is really building up, and it looks like there's bumpies, but there really isn't. If you turn sideways, you can see there's no displacement at all. This is just a pure illusion. If I turn off wireframe, see, it looks like there's a surface on this, but there really isn't it. Remember, bump maps and normal maps are pure illusion. So, I mean, this thing looks like it's really built up. It's really sticking out here. But when you go sideways, it all starts to disappear. You see that there's no actual physical thickness. So I hope that gives you an understanding of just the concept of subdividing and what it actually does to your. So let's turn wireframe back on. What happens when you import something with a new subdivision level? So let's go new. Don't save. And now I'm going to show you what happens when you import something model for micro vertex painting, which means that you can actually displace the mesh when you're painting with the depth function. See, because this is sort of purpley, pinkish, whitish kind of thing, it reminds me of a normal map, but really this is the depth channel. So with the depth channel, you can paint true displacement, or you can paint normal maps, which is fake displacement. So let's go back again to import. So per pixel painting would be more for painting normal maps. Fake displacement. Micro vertex painting is for true displacement. Let's click Model Micro Vertex Painting. And let's grab our low poly cube again. Okay, so you can see here that, see how it says 54 polygons? Just like in Lightwave, it shows 54 polygons. So I can really do a huge amount of displacement. Okay, so let's go 13,000. Let's not go too crazy. Let's just bring this map down, not that we're going to use it. And let's click OK. Let's give it a moment. Okay, so you can see once again it's rounded my sphere. Okay, Now, there are ways to keep something like that from happening if you wanted to keep sharper edges. But right now, I just want to get the point across of what we're going to do here with how displacement works when we're in micro vertex painting mode. So when we were in per pixel painting mode, this literally was for painting normal maps, fake displacement. If I just make my brush a little bigger here, and you can see here that this actually paints true displacement. Okay. So those of you who've used software like ZBrush, this probably looks very familiar to you. One of the problems with micro vertex painting, just like in ZBrush, now there are ways to correct stuff in ZBrush as well, is that notice that the polygons, if we zoom in here, you can see the polygons get all stretched out. When you're working with voxels, we don't have this issue. We're working in volumes, and it doesn't really work there. See how things are kind of getting ugly? They're not mushy anymore. You can see things are kind of getting spiky and ugly as I go. They're no longer smooth. So that's the one drawback of micro vertex painting, is if you're trying to make all these great protrusions coming out and stuff, after a while your sculpt is no longer smooth. And a similar thing happens in ZBrush, but there are ways to redistribute the polygons so that there's an even amount of polygons instead of like weird stretchy ones. So basically, like I said, it subdivides the object into multiple subdivision levels. And remember, this is actually a 54 polygon cube. So if I go under View and let's click Low Poly, see, look. See how our sculpted our sculpted mesh is trying to conform to this low poly cage. Okay, so if I go back to View again and I click off of low poly, it jumps back to this ugly mesh. Okay, so I generally don't work in this mode. For the pipeline that I use, you can, but generally what I like to do is, if I model something in Lightwave, I get all the big deep sculpts actually modeled there, or I'll sculpt something with voxels so I don't have to worry about this stuff, these stretchy things, and then I'll do retopology in the retopo room here, and I'll get the exact polygon flow that I want, and I won't have extra amounts of polygons in my mesh. Now, this is not bad if, say, you just wanted to make some subtle bumps on, say, like for instance, a thing that I like to do sometimes on creatures and stuff is add little backbone bumps, okay, just to show that their spine is kind of sticking out a bit. Now, that's probably something more beneficial, because then when you look at the model sideways, you can actually see the displacement on the surface. And what you can do is you can save that to a displacement map. I will show that, how to do that, how to export a displacement map so that you can add like little bumpies and stuff. But for doing doing large displacements, like what I just did here, like trying to push this thing out, it's not very great if you're trying to rebake the a displacement back down to your original cage mesh. I mean, see, look at the difference with this. It just sort of looks, it's a little off. There's a huge difference because there just isn't enough polygons to actually really to recreate the shape that we just created properly. Now, you could take this kind of sculpting, and then you can actually still bring it into the retopo room, and then you can actually could start retopologizing this. Okay, so you can see here that I'm starting to add. Not that I'm doing a very good job, but you can do retopology to this whole thing. And because there's so much junk in here, we'd have to make the polygons a little smaller because they're cutting through the surface here. But yeah, you can do sculpting using this micro vertex method to create your mesh, or voxel. So 3D Coat has a lot of different ways that you can go. You can bring in meshes from other software, do retopology to them. You can create and modify meshes inside of the micro vertex mode, micro vertex painting mode, and you can create models using voxels, and then once again retopologize them. So we have a lot of different things, but if I had to choose between this method and voxels, I would definitely go with voxels. But if you want to go this way, I'm not going to stop you. Just that with voxels, to me, you have a lot more options. But as far as, like I said, adding some subtle bumps, subtle grooves and crevices, it could be like bone bumps, like say you're some sort of creature, dinosaur, or whatever. You want to add some subtle displacement on the face of your character. Then yeah, this might be a way to go while keeping your polygon count down, and that way some of it gets, some of these little bumps get baked to a displacement map. So once again, you don't have to use a lot of polygons, because when you bring a low poly mesh back into another piece of software like Lightwave, the actual if it's a sub-D object like the elephant there that we showed here earlier, basically what'll happen is you can have a low cage mesh like this, and because this is a subdivision object, you can once again apply that displacement map and have these subtle bumps in different areas, and without having to have really increase the amount of polygons in your low cage mesh. You will, because it's a subdivision level object. Yes, when you're in sub-D mode, if we say you're in layout, this actually does have more polygons in it for rendering purposes, and then your map gets applied to this. Literally, in a weird way, it's kind of like fake geometry that it creates in between. That's how we have these nice smooth slopes. And then what happens is this fake displacement, this spline geometry, when you add a displacement map on top of that was created in 3D Coat, it's sort of like, you have these curves, and then we also add more curves and more bumps on top, kind of like, think of it like layering in Photoshop. So there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of options, a lot of different ways that you can go. But so what we'll do is we'll stop here, and we'll be back in a moment.